get by. It resides between my eyes. Walk through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Nikita, Vakhrushev of Aspect Agency. And Nikita, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And a big shout out to Anatoly Lubinsky of Golden Stream Media, who actually introduced us. And check out the episode I did with him. Again, they're both in the e-commerce world, so you'll learn a lot from the agency side and also the e-commerce side. Also, I had Andy Crestadina, who started Orbit Media Studios. And, this is kind of relevant because, Nikita, we're going to talk about niche services. And really, Nikita is niched down to really email and SMS. And Andy really, they specialize in really high performing websites. And so it's interesting to hear how people niche not only in industry, but in services. And he's also a fellow Chicagoan, like Nikita is from here as well. And so this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We are an easy button for a company to launch and run their podcast. We do accountability, strategy, and the full production execution of a podcast. And, Nikita, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way to do that than to profile the people and companies I most admire and share what they're working on over the past decade. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com to learn more. And without further ado, Nikita Vakhrushev, I was saying, is founder of Aspect Marketing, and that's Aspect with a K, ASPEKT Marketing. And he started his agency back in 2017. He actually started his own e-commerce brand first, and then he decided, well, I'm going to start an agency as well. And he found his place in e-commerce advertising services to serve, probably scratch his own itch there. And he found great success, and he went through an evolution. We'll talk about the evolution of the different services he provided, but then he just doubled down on email and SMS marketing, which that's what he specializes in now. And after helping over 100 direct-to-consumer brands, he has a very unique perspective when it comes to most out there and the brand's retention channels. So, Nikita, thanks for joining me.
Jeremy, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast. Personally, it's great to also meet a fellow Chicagoan as well.
Talk about Aspect Marketing and Aspect Agency right now and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. Aspect mainly focuses on helping brands. Okay, I guess the elevator pitch here would be we help add an extra 200 to 400K a year to e-commerce businesses' bottom line. The main reason why we have that number, because we've done it before. There's tons of case studies where we've added an extra 200 grand to someone's bottom line because of our services. And typically that's on average like 30% of the revenue that comes in from the businesses that we work with. 30% of the revenue comes in from email and SMS.
Do you, if you're just listening to the audio, I'm showing there's a video piece here, and we're showing Aspect Agency's website. It looks beautiful, actually, Nikita. And also, I don't know, I'm curious if you learned direct response marketing from anyone, because you're very good at, that's a very benefit-driven headline. It doesn't say what you do, but it's like, it is a result that a company wants to get, right? You don't even say email or SMS. You're like, do you want to add $200,000 to your bottom line? So I think it's kind of like a master class of how do you approach companies, right? And did you learn direct response or marketing from anyone in particular, whether it's personally or resources?
Honestly, it's a mixture of all the different marketing courses that I've taken over the years. Like you mentioned in the intro, I've been in the game for about 6 years now, and I've taken, I don't know, maybe like 50 different courses throughout that time, and all of them have little golden nuggets that I pick away from that talk about copywriting or sales
Mhm.
messages. And I figured it makes sense to have something that's really punchy and really easy to stand out from the crowd. Because no one, if you talk to a marketer, it's like, hey, how can you help me? They can't tell you like, okay, well, it all depends. Usually that's the answer that you get. It's never like, oh, we'll add, an extra 30% of revenue to your bottom line by doing these things. So, and that's the benefit of being in a niche service because you can more accurately predict the results that you can generate for your clients.
So talk about who are some of those people
Yeah.
that you studied?
Yeah. So it's a mixture of, so Sam Ovens is a big influence for me. Same thing with Alex Becker. They're more so new age, like they have their own courses, they have their own YouTube channels. So I've learned a lot from those courses specifically. But you got to also go to the classics like Eugene Schwartz and David Ogilvy. Like I remember, I think in 2017 or 2018, like staying up all night, like reading through different David Ogilvy ads. I remember like the Rolls Royce one is probably the biggest one that I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, that Rolls Royce ad that everyone refers to, but that one's my favorite by far.
What was the headline on the Rolls Royce when it was something like you can't hear the engine or you can't hear I'm forgetting what there was some like famous like tagline
It was
on the
like
Rolls Royce.
at 60 miles an hour, the only thing you'll hear in your Rolls Royce is the clock ticking.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I love it. Any ones today, copywriters, directors, sales marketers that you follow?
At this point, I can't really think of anyone that comes to mind, but I love the peers that I work with. For
Mhm.
example, like Nick Shackelford is a great person that I talk to on a weekly basis, and we chit chat about all the different things going on within the marketing space. Same thing with Eddie Malouf, who runs For Media, and plus all the people that I follow on Twitter. Like I think Charles Miller is a good one, and I think J.K. Molina is also a good one. At this point, there's so much information in the world that it's just hard for me to track down where I get some of the info.
Yeah, no, I love it because I am a constant student learner, so I always like to find resources. And some of the people like Ben Settle, I don't know if you followed his stuff, but
Hmm.
Ben Settle talks a lot about email, all about email. He's
Hmm.
got a different personality than most, so it's kind of entertaining. And I followed people like Kevin Rogers throughout the years too, who's got Copy Chief. But yeah, I love it. And now we talked about your start, and your start came with your own e-commerce brand. So what would take me back to that time and what you were doing at that time?
Man, that time was so rocky in my life personally because okay, just to give you a full on history. So in high school, I used to be a part of the print media club, and there you can make your own t-shirts with screen printing or vinyl heat press. And there I learned a lot about design and basically how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, all the common tools that you see today for digital design and photo manipulation. Fast forward to college, it's my first
I
year of
wish I would have
college.
done that in high school.
Yeah, it was one of those things where like I wanted to make a custom t-shirt and I'm like, how do I do that? And it turns out there was a club, so I just joined it, and it turns out it was a class, and it was a lot of fun. Shout out to Miss Smith if she's listening. But then fast forward to first year of college. You're familiar with this, College of Lake County up in Gurnee. That was, instead of going to the state school route, I went to College of Lake County just to get my general education in. And I think it was in like anthropology class or something like that. I was going through Reddit, not paying attention at all. And there was a thread that was like, hey, make money online by printing t-shirts without doing any of the fulfillment. And I'm like, well, I got to look into this. So I looked into it further, and it was pretty straightforward. Now you can just see it as print on demand t-shirts or print on demand hoodies, basically drop shipping, but for clothing and custom apparel items. So basically, the next week after that, I started my first Shopify store, connected it with Amazon. I got like two sales, and I was getting like 1 to 2 sales a week. But, for a t-shirt that you're selling for 25 bucks, that's really not that much. So I was looking into like, how do I get more sales? A lot of it was like, okay, you got to niche down or pick a niche. So, I picked a niche that I was really familiar with at that time, which was like rapper t-shirts. And I knew a lot about rap quotes and all that. And after I started doing that, I started to pick up, and I was getting like instead of 2 sales a week, it was like 20 sales a day.
So you niched
Significantly.
down from the t-shirts to rap t-shirts and quotes from rappers.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. I remember
So
there was like
who are your favorite rappers?
Kendrick Lamar by far is one of my favorites. I love Run the Jewels, Gucci Mane. Can't deny that. 21 Savage. So I had all of those different rappers like quotes on a T-shirt, and people were just eating it up. And it was it was doing really, really well at the time. And then I unfortunately had a roadblock that came up, and it was basically people that were also doing the same thing that I was doing, but undercutting me on prices, almost to the point where it was unprofitable for me. And I had to unfortunately
How are they
stop.
doing that, do you think?
So basically, it's called Amazon arbitration, and they just take over that same exact listing by posting like, "Hey, I have this exact same item, but it's
But
fulfilled by me."
wouldn't they be losing money though? I mean, it's not like they were doing it much cheaper than you.
From what I noticed, is the only reason I found out they were doing it cheaper and worse than me by the reviews, because people would post reviews of a T-shirt that I didn't sell them, and it looked horrible. It was just like the worst, cheapest, like Gildan type quality, with like the worst print, or like it was a misprint. So it was just I think it was like Chinese competitors that came in because they saw me. I was like number 2 listed for some of the T-shirts. So I ended up just pausing that and starting my own Shopify store, or just doing the Shopify store route instead of going through Amazon. And then that led me to another YouTube rabbit hole of like looking up how to do marketing. And that kind of like sparked the whole entire thing that I'm doing right now.
It's a little bit different, when you have a marketplace feeding you customers, it seems a lot harder to then have your own Shopify store and you gotta drive traffic there.
Yeah, it went back to that same thing of 20 sales a day, back to 2 sales a week or 2 sales a month. It was a rough 2, 3 months until I figured it out, but I was able to train myself up on Facebook ads, email marketing, SEO, basically bootstrapping everything and learning everything online to be able to get back to, I think at peak we were doing again like 20 sales a day. I think we were able to get to like 10K a month in total sales at one point for the t-shirt store before I had to like close it down.
What
But
made you decide to then go double down on the agency?
so I had a lot of friends that were also in the email, or not email, they were in the marketing space, or they were trying to start up their own store. And they're like, "Hey, we need help with like setting up our Facebook pixel. Can you help us do that?" I'm like, this is like 5 minutes of work, of course. And then I charge them like $100 to like do that. Or they're like, "Hey, can you manage our ads?" It's like, "Yeah, for sure, I can do that. It'll be like $500 a month." At that point, it's like pennies, but you got to start somewhere. And that's where I started. I started to build up a clientele base through friends and family and relationships that way. And things didn't really take off until I discovered Upwork, which is like a talent platform where I was able to take the case studies that I got from my friends and put them on Upwork and grew that way to then, after Upwork, being able to generate leads on my own through like cold email or referral partnerships or LinkedIn and so on and so forth.
It's interesting because I've found several agencies that have grown to be pretty large and they had their first initial clients from Upwork.
It's just an easy platform. It's like it's a thing. Okay, I call it like get pizza or want pizza, get pizza marketing. It's like if you want pizza, you're going to look to find that pizza and you will get it. So it's like if someone is looking for a Facebook ads expert, they will find someone on Upwork, and it's just you just have to apply and apply for the gig, and you might as well get it at that point.
I mean, there's a lot of competition and people like with any
Yep.
marketplace. So I don't know if this is the appropriate one, but Mystic Sense.
Yeah, Mystic Sense actually, funny enough, was one of our first clients that came from Upwork. And I think they came in around like August of 2020, and they've been with us for like 2 years now, 2, 3 years. And they've been such a pleasure to work with. They're one of our first like success stories where we were able to really knock it out of the park for them. We generated them almost like $500,000 in sales through email and Facebook ads at the time. So they did super well. And we generated them at least like another 6,000 new customers for them. So it was a real pleasure to work with them. Unfortunately, they were taking all their efforts in-house end of last year, but it was definitely a lot of fun working with them.
What do they sell?
So they're a platform, actually. They help match normal people, us, to psychics and mediums
Really?
on their online platform. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
It's one of those things
Did you
where
end up
like,
ever using them? That you helping them or no?
no, I didn't
No.
end up using them,
Okay.
but I know a few friends that I referred them over to. They're like, this is a great platform. It's one of those niches where like, how is this making any money? And then you look at the analytics on the back and it's like, wow, I should probably start a competitor site about this.
It probably gives you a lot of ideas. I mean, as an agency, I love to talk that route about taking in-house. How
Yeah.
do you educate them that, from my standpoint anyways, I always feel like a lot of times, unless they've grown huge, just to keep the expertise, like obviously you have specific expertise, oftentimes it costs less. You don't have to have full-time staff. And they have to then project manage everything also. Right? How
Yeah.
do you explain to someone, and not everyone's going to listen, that it may be better just to keep, even if they've grown, to keep you as the provider?
Yeah, that's a really good question because sometimes you kind of can't control that. And as much as much like positive reinforcement you try to give to the client, or as much education you give to them, saying like, "Hey, look, we're going to be the better option here," without trying to sound like it's in your best interest, they're still not going to listen, and they will still go their own way. Like for example, like one of our success stories, Good Clean Love, we were able to generate an extra 20 to 30K a month for them through some of the optimizations that we made. They had a full in-house team that was doing email marketing, but they weren't generating the results that we generated them because, otherwise they wouldn't have hired us. But unfortunately, they had to move on and, not work with us after a few months because they're like, okay, cool, we can probably do this in-house. And at the same time, for me, it was a little frustrating because it's like, okay, if you had it done in-house, then why did you hire us to begin with? You know? So it's like you hired us for our expertise. We were able to get you those results, but it just didn't work out.
Do they just feel like you've done so much heavy lifting and we could take it from here? Or what is their thought in
I
there?
think it's a lot of office politics, and I don't really want to get into the details of that
Yeah.
because I don't know, that's on them. But I think it was just a lot of office politics, and they didn't want to work with an agency, and they wanted to keep the employees that they had, even if it was inefficient for them.
Yeah. I mean, I find, at least sometimes with companies, sometimes the team has so much to work on internally that an extra resource outside is helpful, that they can focus on, other work that they need to be doing. I don't know if you've found that.
Honestly, those are some of the best relationships we've had with clients is if we're on more of a consultative base. Like, for example, Mossy Oak, one of our biggest clients that we worked with, we were on a very consultative basis where they're like, hey, look, we need another fresh eye to look at this. They have their own internal marketing team. They're like, a 20, $30 million brand. And they wanted us to take a look at the D2C side and see what they're doing with their email marketing. How could they improve on it? We did that, and we worked with them on a month by month basis. Like, hey, look, these are the things that you guys are doing right. These are the things that you guys need help on. And here's how we could do it. And we were able to supply them with different templates, different strategies, different tactics to help elevate their email marketing and their SMS marketing purely just by having like weekly calls and auditing their back end and letting their team do the fulfillment.
Who's an ideal client for you, that that they won't just like, okay, just come in for like a month and do some heavy lifting and then you're gone, like a longer term client? What does that client look like, maybe size wise or type of company?
Yeah, we love working with clients long term because we know that's where the real gains are made, through long term relationships. It's like, yeah, you can do the one and done, but a lot of the times, the longer that we work with a client, the more optimizations we can make. And funny enough, sometimes you can even squeeze out an extra 10% of revenue by working with them long term. So in that case, we typically, the brands that we can help the most are usually doing anywhere above $50,000 a month in revenue and usually cap off at around $500,000 a month in revenue, because that's when they try to take things in-house. So within that sweet spot, that's where we help out. And they usually have at least 10,000 email subscribers that they work with, or that they have on their list. And that, by optimizing things around those 10,000 subscribers, at least, we can see most of the gains made through our services.
Are there certain industries you like to work with?
As long as it's in e-commerce, like if it's a direct-to-consumer brand or if it's an e-commerce brand, that's usually the types that we work with. Most of them are on Shopify or WooCommerce, and they typically have Klaviyo, MailChimp, SendLane, or OmniSend as their email service providers.
We're looking at right now Mossy Oak, right? And you're looking at these are specifically what we're looking at. These are emails, not web pages, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about some of the elements that work. Maybe we'll talk about some of the mistakes people make, but which one should we talk about? There's, the first, second, or third column, and some of the elements that you recommend people including in emails.
We can go with the turkey target one, which is the one you're hovering on.
Yep.
There's a zoom in button at the top. There you go. So basically, this one is actually a lead generation form. So with Mossy Oak, their biggest season of sales is usually during turkey season, and you're almost there. Sorry. It's turkey season, and that's where they get most of their sales, because that's when people buy the most gear to go out to hunt turkeys.
So we can see full color, black and white, and orange bullseye with these turkey on it.
Yeah. So on their main website, they have a pop-up saying like, hey, do you want a free turkey target to practice with? And this is the email they get immediately after they submit their email.
So it's a turkey target. I gotcha.
Yep. Yeah, it's like a PDF that prints out on a normal sheet of paper that you can use as a practice. And this has done super well because, number one, it's free, it's printable, it's free information. It's a way to interact with your consumer base without doing any work. Pretty much all you have to do is just make a quick design of the turkey target, and you get more email addresses opting into your email list.
Okay, so we see that at the top, and then what's next? What else do we see here?
Yep. So once we provide them with what they asked for, which is that turkey target, we then move on to getting them turkey season ready. And you can see that clearly on the call to action here on the video version, where we talk about some of the most popular gear that people buy when they go out turkey hunting, which is the Flex mesh mask, which helps camouflage their neck, or the leafy hoodie, pullover. All of those things are very catered to this specific email, because we know people that are getting that target are most likely hunters that are going to be participating. And, maybe they have gear that's a year or two old. This is the best time for them to upgrade their gear. And, we see a lot of success with this specific email because it's a nice parlay into sales.
I'm curious, Nikita, from this, I've heard varying opinions on this, and we should only have one call to action that we're pointing people towards. What did you find? Obviously, I'm curious why, there's several options here, as opposed to you could just focus on the turkey target. So I'm sure you've tested this many times and you've seen results. For people who are thinking, hey, I thought I was supposed to put one thing in there for people to focus in on. What are your thoughts on that?
It truly depends on the email that you're trying to do. If it's educational, I think one call to action is more than enough. But in this case, this is purely a transactional email, and transactional in the way of hey, you wanted turkey targets, here are the turkey targets. But since you're here, you might as well just check out these items, And when it comes down to these types of emails, I think it's not about the one call to action. It's more so one topic. That's what we try to focus on, because we've worked with brands and they would be saying okay, here's a food and beverage brand, for example. They would say okay, here's a recipe for peach cobbler, but also check out these, kitchen accessories, but also check out our social media, and also check out this podcast that the CEO did. That's 4 different topics in one email. Ideally, we'd want to break that off into one specific subject per email into 4 different emails. And that is going to be driving a lot more engagement, a lot more clicks, and eventually a lot more sales, for your brand.
I mean, it also depends on where they are in the sequence. It sounds like these people specifically were interested in these turkey targets. So that's the first thing that they see. Can you talk about the different sequences, just like if we zoomed out for a second, different sequences that people should consider when they're thinking about doing email?
Yeah, so I mean, I can talk about this for days, but I don't want to bore your audience too much. The big three is the big three sequences or automations or flows, whatever you want to call it. They're the most important ones. And number one is the welcome series, which is an introductory automation for your email subscribers to be introduced to the brand. So this is where they learn more about your brand, what you do, what makes you different, and any promotions that you want to sprinkle in there as you go along. Then you go into abandoned cart, which is purely transactional. This is someone that has, saw that let's say you have a phone case brand. They put the phone case in their cart. They're about to check out, but something came up and they didn't finish checking out. This is a transactional email, and this is more so to remind people about, hey, you left something in your cart. Don't forget it. Then we would want to back that up with testimonials as another email after that, and then maybe even more testimonials after that. This is more so a reminder for people to finish checking out, and that one does really well. And the last one is a post-purchase series. This is an email that you send out after someone's purchased, and this one is crucial, and most people don't take seriously enough because they're mostly focused on getting the customer. And it's like, okay, cool, we got the customer. It's like, all right, cool, whatever. You still want to nurture that relationship. So after they become a customer, you still want to say like, hey, thank you for purchasing. You're supporting a local business, or you're supporting our family, whatever you want to write there. After that, we then want to get into how to use the product. If your product has specific instructions, you want to introduce the person to like, hey, here's our wiki guide on how to use the product, or here's our YouTube series on how to set this product up. Then we also encourage users to go ahead and submit a review or submit user-generated content for us that we can use on the website, or testimonials that they would want to submit. And lastly, if they're interested, we also have upsells after that, which also generate more revenue, of course.
No, Nikita, I love you walking through that because, again, we're talking e-commerce, but this applies to any business, right? Do you have a welcome series, an abandoned cart? Maybe it's only specific to e-commerce, but you could still, I guess, do retargeting or something if they hit your site, and then retarget them with something, and then post-purchase, and talking about user-generated content and reviews, like that applies to whether you're a SaaS company, an agency, or anyone for that matter.
Well, look, I mean, I practice what I preach. If you go on the website and you click on newsletter, you submit your email and your phone number and your info. You will get an email 5 minutes later introducing me and who I am and talking about what you've just signed up for. And then a week later, you'll get another email. And, it's a very educational series because that's what we do. We want to educate users on how to use email properly. And that's why people sign up for the newsletter. But at the same time, if we have a lead come in, let's say you're interested in email marketing, we had a call, they're added to the quote unquote abandoned cart folder in my email to follow up with on every Thursday. Like, hey, how's it going? Do we want to move forward with this? Or here's a resource I found that you might find useful. Is a good way to bump up and follow up with prospects.
Yeah, I know under each of these categories, the welcome series, abandon, and the post-purchase, there's a lot that goes into each one of those. When I know that you do an audit for people, where do you find, is there a common one of those that people are missing the boat most in?
They have them set up because the thing is they're not missing them. Since they're the most basic three automations, they have them set up. The thing is they don't have them set up correctly, or they only have one email set up per that automation. So for a welcome series, we usually build out a welcome series for a client that's anywhere between 9 to 12 emails long. That's a 2-month long campaign pretty much. For abandoned cart, usually it's one email. We build it out anywhere between 4 to 5 emails. And with post-purchase, the same thing. It's anywhere between 4 to 5 emails that we build out versus one email. So we're just expanding the touch points that we have with the customer because we know that those touch points are going to lead to more sales and they're going to generate more revenue because they're getting more impressions from your brand and who you are.
I want to talk about tech for a second. I know that you've talked about apps and tech. You've talked about Klaviyo before. I'm curious your favorite tech.
Yeah, Klaviyo, however you want to say it, that's by far our favorite or that's our favorite email service provider. Number one, because it's very easy plug and play with e-commerce based brands. And since that's our main niche, that is the main tool that we use. But there's also other tools like MailChimp. MailChimp's okay for, everything else. Like if you own like a power washing business, MailChimp's fine for you. But if you're looking for e-commerce specific, Klaviyo is great. OmniSend is great. SendLane is great. It's a cheaper alternative to Klaviyo, which is good as well. But I'd say Klaviyo is number one when it comes down to the tech that we use.
Any other favorite e-commerce apps? I'm sure there's, I know there's people probably use Shopify or BigCommerce or one of those. Are there any favorite apps that you have in those platforms?
Yeah, Shopify is perfect for setting up your store and building off of that. The great thing about Shopify, Klaviyo, and all these different apps is they're really easy to integrate with all the other things in your tech stack. So, let's say if you're just starting off with Shopify and Klaviyo, you got the bases covered there. But if you want to add a review software, all you have to do is just go to the Shopify App Store and add it on and go from there. As far as getting emails opted in, I would recommend just Uno. It's a great platform for getting emails opted in. Like they do pop-ups as well as they do pop-up surveys, that sort of thing. And there's another one I'm missing. Privy. Privy is also a good pop-up software that I highly recommend. And Octane AI is good for quizzes as well.
What about, we talked about the welcome series for email. I want to switch to SMS for a second.
Right.
Do you get pushback at all about building SMS series from companies saying, well, we don't want to be intrusive, or are they on board?
It's funny because sometimes we even have pushback on the amount of emails that we send. So, but on the SMS side, we try to be as non-invasive as possible and as natural as possible when it comes to using that platform or that marketing channel. Number one, because I even sometimes when I get too many messages from a brand, I get a little bit pissed and I reply with stop. So we try to send out at most once a week, if not once every other week, an SMS text message. And if we are sending more than one a week, we want to make sure that we're segmenting the users correctly. So here we don't want to send to the same exact person twice in a week. We'd want to send out, let's say, to the engaged list once, and then to people that didn't purchase once and people that purchased once. So that way no one gets double dipped. And when it comes to SMS, we do get a little bit of pushback because they don't want to be as invasive. Like you mentioned, we want to make sure that we're hitting the audience, but we're also not doing it in a way where it's not bothering them. And we do that by making sure that the content is relevant, or the content is something that people would want to actually open and read. And number two is that the frequency isn't high, which I just talked about.
What would be an example of a relevancy where they'd be excited to get that text message?
Everybody loves money off. So whenever it comes to sales and promotions, those are really good. Obviously, when it comes down to educational, we try not to do too much educational because there is a character limit. And if you go over that character limit, you have to pay extra per send. So whenever it does come to education, it's usually a short blurb about, let's say, a new study that the company just released, or a new video collab, or maybe even a new podcast that the company just released, plus the link to that specific thing where they can read more about it.
Are there certain platforms that you like from SMS perspective?
Yeah, so Klaviyo has an in-platform SMS channel that you can use. I preferred using Klaviyo for everything. Number one is because you have all the data in the same place. And number two, you can integrate it into your existing automations. So for example, in that abandoned cart series, if we have a client that wants to do SMS as well, we set up an SMS message as like another version of a follow-up. So if you abandon something in the cart, you get an email and you get an SMS. So you're more likely to recover that cart with SMS as well. But aside from Klaviyo, we love to use SMS Bump, Postscript, and Attentive are all good platforms.
Yeah. I want to talk about niching, right? Originally, when we talked about Mystic Sense, you were, I think, doing a little bit of everything. I want to talk about the evolution of your services.
Yeah. So when I started off with the e-com store, I knew I was trying to learn everything all at once, which was email marketing, Facebook ads, Google ads, Bing ads, SEO, website design. And luckily, I had a good foundation of understanding how things work within each different marketing channel, which is like Google ads is completely different than Facebook, completely different than email. So that really helped me out when I transitioned all my skills into Upwork, because sometimes a client would be like, okay, we're looking for Facebook ads, but we're also looking for a different person for email. I'm like, well, I can do both. So that really helped with generating clients that way. And it was great as a freelancer because I knew what I was doing and I had creative control over everything. As I started to expand my team and started to hire on people, those services got more and more complicated, bigger. We were working with bigger retainers, bigger brands, a lot more communication touch points. And it got to a point where we were doing, I think, Facebook, Google, TikTok, creative services, conversion rate optimization, email marketing. It's like 6 or 7 different services, all fulfilled by like a team of 5, for like 6 clients. It gets really, really complicated. And the money was good, but also, you had to pay a lot for the wages and all the different softwares. So it got to a breaking point where I was stressful. I'm like, I'm working way more, I'm making way less because of all the different employees that I had to pay. So I'm like, okay, cool. How do I switch this up? So I looked at it and I'm like, okay, cool. Email marketing is by far the best retention of all of our services. With Facebook ads, we would churn anywhere between 3 to 6 months on average. And with email marketing, we had clients that stayed on anywhere between 9 to 12 months, if not 14 months and beyond that. So we're like, okay, cool. Email marketing is by far the best for retention. What about our results? So with clients that were doing Facebook ads, our results were it was like a 60% success rate, meaning for 6 out of 10 clients, we would, knock it out of the park for. The 4, unfortunately, we couldn't, help them get to that same point, which is not really good when it comes down to agency services. With email marketing, pretty much 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, we would knock it out of the park for, and we wouldn't have anyone be upset at us for, we wouldn't mess up any email jobs. So like, okay, cool. This retains clients more and we do a great job at it. Why don't we just focus on this specific niche within this specific e-commerce niche? And we did just that. We started to slowly offload our Facebook clients and only focus on getting email clients. And it's honestly been the best thing I've ever done within the business, because we are able to predictably add revenue for our clients. We know what to look for. We know how the relationship is going to go. And at the same time, it's a lot easier for us to fulfill because we know what to look for within these brands. And the strategy, for the most part, is pretty much the same for every client.
Yeah, I like how you think about that, Nikita, because you think retention and results. What do we have the best retention? Where do we get the best results, and go from there? And I hear, it takes discipline to do what you did, right? Because I hear agencies who they may get demand from a client. And I don't know if this happens to you, is like, okay, I love you, I want to work with you, but we want a provider that does everything. And the person will have to either go, okay, I could do everything, or we're not a right fit.
Yeah, I say no more than I say yes, 100%, because of that. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, if you want an agency with everything, here is a contact for that partner. I know a lot of agencies that do everything, but if you want someone to absolutely kill it with email, we're your go-to guys.
Yep. Let's talk about hiring and training before we hit record. We were talking about that's a big focus for you. You're hiring. When you bring people in, you're training them. What do you find the best methods to, when you bring someone new, to get them on board and train them as quickly as possible?
So it's funny that you mentioned once you get them on board, because we do all of our training, funny enough, before we even onboard them as a potential hire. Because the way that I structured my hiring, I think I learned this from Kai Bax, who's a specialist in working with agencies and generating them clients. Basically, the way that he hired was he would have, the standard like LinkedIn post, or like the LinkedIn job application or the Indeed job application. And you would have to apply through a link. And that link is either hosted on your website or a landing page or whatever. Within that link, you would have a video of anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes long going over the entire position that you're looking for, as well as educating them about the culture that you have, the company that you're building, what the goals are, what the mission, the vision, the principles are, as well as the compensation. Everything that you might ever question about this job position is answered by me in this video. So when we're hiring, I have, this 20-minute video with like a slide deck going over everything they might need to know. So once we do hire them, they already have the expectations set of like, look, this is how we work. These are our principles. If you can't follow them, get out. We'll find a different person. I'm not that cutthroat, I promise, but that's usually how it goes.
Yeah. Let's talk about the onboarding of a client and kind of the phases you take people through. I'm going to share this for a second. That was when I was looking on your website, and talk about onboarding of a client and how it works.
Yeah. So most agencies take, weeks, if not months, to onboard a client. Our goal is to get someone fully onboarded within the first 5 business days. As we get off the sales call, I send them the agreement, I send them the invoice, that gets signed, that gets paid. Great. Here's to the next 5 days of trying to get you onboarded, so that way we can start delivering results for you as quickly as possible. One of our core principles in our company is speed is king. And we want to make sure that, speed is the best currency when it comes to working with a company. And a lot of opportunities can be missed if you're too slow. So that is very well played into our onboarding. And a lot of the onboarding is, again, like those video series we have like a 5-part video series conducted by me, going over, again, the company culture, the expectations, how to set up your Slack channel, how to give us access to your Klaviyo account or your email account, how to work within the database that we, set up all the emails. Everything is instructional. So that way the client can, spend maybe like an hour or 2 hours at most watching through these videos, getting acquainted with everything. And then usually 3 days after that, we have a phone call where we get all the information that we're missing. And pretty much the week after that, we start working with them and start designing emails.
And that's in the launch phase.
Yep, exactly.
I have to just say, one of my favorite parts of your website is right here.
The clicking, yeah.
I love this. I don't know why more people don't do this.
I got it from like Twitter. Some guy on Twitter was like, "Hey, thanks for reading my thread," and he would point up and down to like retweet it. And I'm like, "This is a great idea. I got to do it."
Yeah. Again, if you're listening to the audio, just look. You'll have to go to the video and see exactly what I'm looking at, or you can go to aspectagency.com and check the page out. But I love that. Nikita, I want to talk about, because you mentioned, values are big for you and the company, and how you came up with these.
Yeah, a lot of them, it's a mishmash, and it kind of goes back to a name I mentioned earlier, Sam Ovens. He introduced the whole point of company principles. And at the time, I was just, I think, 2 years in, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I'm like, I didn't even know companies have principles. So it was like a list of 10 different principles. And then over the time, I realized, okay, these 6 are the most important ones when it comes down to our business and the kind of culture we want to create within the company. So number one, like as a person myself, I like to do things very quickly, very efficiently, and very correctly. So speed is king came from there. Brutal honesty. I'm very transparent with everyone that I talk to. If I see someone messing something up, I will tell it to them straight to their face. I try to do it in a nice way, where I'm not trying to hurt their feelings, or try to go for their personality.
Do you say it to them in Russian first and then and then say it nicer in English?
No, I don't see any point in yelling or getting aggressive with anyone. So I try to just be as honest as possible without hurting anyone personally. Owner mindset, it's a remote position. We try to make sure that they understand that, okay, you are your own boss, essentially. I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder. Same thing with taking accountability, and also evolving as a person, which goes into grow or die. You're either moving forward or you're going backwards. So you got to either, grow as a person or grow as an employee, or you're eventually going to be cut from the team.
So how do you say this brutal honesty in Russian?
Честность. It's basically like honesty.
Love it. So I have one last question. Nikita, first of all, thank you. Thanks for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, your journey. And I want to encourage people to check out aspectagency.com. It's ASPEKT agency.com. And last question is really, we've talked a lot about your journey. And I'd love to talk, one of the cases that we were talking about before we hit record was Retainers Direct. And what were some of the things you did with Retainers Direct?
Retainers Direct is by far one of my favorite clients. Tanner, if you're listening, big shout out to you. That's our main point of contact at Retainers Direct, and he's one of the co-founders. Basically, we took them from generating, I think it was like $500 a month in email revenue, all the way up to like consistent 20K months in email revenue. So they had basically nothing. They had emails set up, but I don't think they were working properly. And the past agency that set them up, the emails weren't doing the job that they were supposed to do. So we came in there, we cleaned things up, implemented brand new automations, started sending out campaigns on a more consistent basis. And we were able to, generate them a substantial amount of income to the point where, it's a sizable chunk on their P&L now.
So there's a couple things we're seeing here. What worked for them as far as some of these campaigns?
So those are specific emails that we send out on a biweekly or weekly basis. And I think out of all of those three, the middle one worked the best because it was educational. People have a lot of hard time trying to trust a brand that isn't Invisalign in the space, basically, because Invisalign is such a huge brand.
Is this a teeth whitening solution? Retainer?
No, it's a retainer, actually.
A retainer.
So
okay.
It's a cheaper alternative to Invisalign. So you see, like, even me saying that, it already automatically assumes like Invisalign is better because of retainer, like because of the way I worded that. So we wanted to make sure that we educated our customers and our prospects into understanding why it's better to choose us. And one of the best ways we did that was teaching them on when they should be replacing their retainer, because you need to do it every 2 years. And if you don't, you're more likely to develop bad side effects if you don't. So this educational email actually generated us, I think it was like $2,000 or $3,000 in sales because of the nature of the email.
I love it. First of all, Nikita, thank you. Everyone check out more episodes of the podcast to learn more. And I want to be the first one to thank you and thank everyone else. Thanks, Nikita.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.